In July 2019, we uploaded a YouTube video that detailed several encounters with a cryptid known as a ghoul before deleting it. From a terrifying but harmless incident in a Kuwaiti suburb in the early 2000s to a deadly Gulf conflict encounter a decade earlier in Saudi Arabia, we had examined what these creatures could be. Are they myth or reality? Are they jinn or animals? Humans or genetic mutants? What we do know is that they usually inhabit graveyards, have the ability to shapeshift, and love to eat the flesh of the recently deceased. In this episode, we will visit the world's largest necropolis in Cairo, known as the City of the Dead, as well as the world's largest cemetery in Iraq. Two places in the Middle East where we are most likely to meet a ghoul. But wait, before we jump into this episode, let's address the elephant in the room. What about that July 2019 upload we deleted? Well, it seems someone was not too happy with our critical take on his story about the bodies of a group of Saudi officers found in the desert. So he wrongfully submitted a copyright claim on the video, pushing us to remove it from YouTube. He also slapped a strike on the channel. Who was this person? Well, from here on, we will only refer to him as Tom. Tom's fictional tale begins in early 90s Saudi Arabia as an American soldier stationed there. At this time, he claims he was investigating the disappearance of a troop of officers in a remote part of the desert. According to Tom, they were eventually all found eaten, with the incident happening very shortly before the 1990 Gulf conflict began. The conclusion we had taken here on the mysterious Middle East was that the story was as fantastical as it is unlikely. Why? Well, because his ghoulish explanation for the deaths of these officers allegedly came from a Saudi government employee, who even as a joke, during wartime no less, is unlikely to seriously admit to a member of a foreign power that monsters had eaten a squad of its officers. Flash forward to December 2019, in trying to decipher whether this incident took place, instead of us investigating these ghouls, we decided to investigate Tom. According to claims made on Coast to Coast back in 2008, Tom stated that he was a whistleblower who had worked for 10 years as a US Department of Defense librarian in charge of document destruction. Because of that, he had access to many cover-ups concerning a number of anomalous events worldwide, including encounters with vampires, zombies, psychic warfare, and several classified documents concerning Nikola Tesla, H.P. Lovecraft, and L. Ron Hubbard. However, naturally, with such an impressive background, a number of bloggers have been ultra-critical of his claims, calling him out as a disinformation agent with an overactive imagination. Bloggers such as Richard K. Cole, Berners M.E., and others have critically dissected Tom's claims, background, and stories, ultimately exposing him. Now, since the mysterious Middle East does not actually care about who Tom is and what he wants to write about, as this channel's only goal is to highlight strange events from our culture and folklore that take place in modern times, the only thing that interests us about him is his stories about us and our folklore, and if there could be any truth to what he claims. So this was the plan. Step 1. Determine if Tom was actually stationed in the Gulf during the early 90s. Step 2. Use our contacts in Saudi Arabia to verify if any anomalous events occurred there at that time. And finally, Step 3. Theorize exactly how much of these events are really urban legends or reality. We understand that Step 2 and 3 would be difficult to complete, but there is a word called wasta, which we can exercise. Beginning with Step 1, in addition to the Saudi officers who were attacked by a number of ghouls, Tom also claims that on another occasion he had somehow single-handedly killed 2 Saudi officers, with his bare hands no less, was arrested for their deaths and then released into US custody, and finally court-martialed. Fortunately for us, a lot of the work in verifying these events had already been done for us. Thus, we did not need to move on to step 2 and 3. But first, a mild disclaimer. All the following information is not from our own research, and nor even our opinions, but from a YouTuber called Gunner65, and those aforementioned fringe theory bloggers, all of whom have already extensively written and published articles online about Tom. We are just reporting and repeating their findings in this video. YouTuber Gunner65 is a US ex-serviceman who had obtained under the US Freedom of Information Act the military files of this individual. These files states that Tom actually flunked out of the military several years before the ghoul attack even occurred. This means that everything he said happened in Saudi Arabia never happened. His military paperwork that has been posted online clearly states that he was only a recruit in training between October 1987 and January 1988, after which he was discharged, a whole 2.5 years before everything he said he experienced in Saudi Arabia ever took place. Ultimately, those who have gathered this information have concluded that much of what he has to say remains questionable, including his supernatural adventures in the Middle East. We neither agree or disagree with their findings, and will leave it up to you to decide. And so, we will stop wasting valuable time on him and move on to far more serious matters in the world's largest cemetery in Iraq. In Islam, there are 3 forms of intelligent beings that are said to exist in our reality: humans, angels, and the Jinn. While humans are made from clay and formed into flesh and blood, angels are made of light, and the Jinn are made from fire. What makes ghouls different from Jinn is that they are shown to have more in common with humans than spirits. They are not made of fire, and instead are usually referred to as solid creatures that are humanoid in appearance. A modern scientific designation for the species could fall under the term cryptid, in reference to cryptozoology, the documentation of mammals that have yet to receive an official scientific classification. However, like the Jinn, ghouls have the ability to shapeshift and take form of other living creatures, particularly the recently deceased, choosing to frequent graveyards as their dwelling place. In 2013, in Najaf, Wadi-us-Salaam, the world's largest cemetery, 150 kilometers south of Baghdad, Jawad Abu Sebi, a 23-year-old gravedigger, claims to be the victim of a ghoul attack. One night, while he was working inside a grave, placing a dead woman into her tomb, she seemingly sprung to life and slapped his face, before becoming lifeless again. The incident, although seemingly not life-threatening, traumatized Abu Sebi. This encounter is just one of many that have occurred at this cemetery. Wadi-us-Salaam covers about 13% of Najaf, which is a size equivalent to 900 rugby fields. According to UNESCO, which has placed the cemetery on its tentative list of World Heritage Sites, Wadi-us-Salaam is the only graveyard in the world where the burial process has been continuous for more than 1,400 years. Today, more than 5 million people are buried at the cemetery. So for some gravediggers, the psychological strain of their environment is overwhelming. For example, 26-year-old Haidar al-Hatimi said that he was once attacked by a shadow, hitting him across his head with a tremendous force. The incident has since then caused him severe psychological trauma, while impeding his ability to work properly. Meanwhile, a Mr. Hani Abu Ghnaim, who has been a grave digger for more than 11 years, says he has seen a ghoul several times. He says, "I saw it at night, jumping from grave to grave to feed on freshly buried bodies. It successively resembles a big worm, a child, and a cat covered in a thick fur. If we come across it, I scream at it to go away." However, with no photographic or filmed evidence of these encounters readily available, a question mark remains on whether these ghoul attacks are real or just a tragic symptom of psychological stress. Since ghouls are known to inhabit graveyards, how about in the world's biggest necropolis, Cairo, city of the dead? Well, surprisingly, nothing. Growing up, We have all heard ghost stories about Djinn sightings across the district, but actual serious reports of supernatural encounters there are tragically non-existent. Included in the UNESCO World Heritage Site of historic Cairo, the necropolis is separated roughly into two regions: the northern cemetery to the north of the beautiful citadel, and the old southern cemetery to the south. Families here live amongst an ever-expanding area of graves, with apartment blocks built above and around them. Today, many Egyptians from other parts of the country are said to avoid the area at night, but not because of the Djinn and ghouls, but because the area is frequented by social outcasts, petty criminals. Speaking to Reuters News, one local resident put it perfectly. Living with the dead is actually peaceful. It's the people who are alive who could harm you. So this leads us to the question of what exactly are ghouls, and are they real enough to cause an actual threat to humans? Islamic scholars believe ghouls are just fictionalized versions of Jinn, which originated from ancient Samaria. Since Akkad and Sumer were very close to the Arabian deserts, Arab Bedouins, in contact with Mesopotamian cultures, could have borrowed the belief in the ghouls from the Akkadians. Other academics explain that the ghoul is just the fictional embodiment of Middle Eastern cultural anxieties surrounding death. The historian Ahmad Arar argues that within the pre-Islamic Arab world, the concept of the ghoul may have emerged from superstitions surrounding birth defects. When some babies were inevitably born disabled, for pre-Islamic Arabs, these poor children would be perceived as demons and expelled from the community and into the desert, where they may struggle to survive, eating the flesh of the recently deceased in graveyards as their only food. While there is still very likely a real supernatural component to these creatures' existence and the graveyards they inhabit, we should also be aware that most of the time, the threat comes from the living and not the undead, at least most of the time. Thanks for watching. If you like what you see, give the video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. And if you have any encounter with a ghoul, comment down below and share it with the community. You can follow me, the narrator, Salah, on Twitter at Eruptonica, and the Mysterious Middle East at East Mystery on Twitter, and East Mysteries on Instagram.